Hey, welcome to the Codepunk podcast. I'm Bill Ahern. I'm with Mike Zool. Welcome to episode 2. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Pretty good. How have things been going with you?
Good. Boring, I have to say, which is probably never really a bad thing.
Is that married life, or is that just in general getting old?
Probably a combination of a bunch of things, really. I don't know if it's married life. My wife is just, she wants to do stuff all the time. And you know what, honestly, I'm finding that now that I don't party like I used to, I want to spend all my time either learning new, like basically coding. I want to code all the time, and I want to learn new stuff, and I want to get good at the stuff that I'm already working with. And I find it's really hard I'm having trouble finding work-life balance, which is probably like a topic for another episode, but like I find it's difficult because a lot of times I'm sitting spending time with my wife, and I'm like thinking about like, why couldn't I get that method to fire or something like that, you know?
Yeah, I run into the same issue, and mine's a little harder. I just recently rediscovered my love of learning a lot of new things because I was in a rut a little bit professionally, and although I was learning, I was kind of looking at other things that I might want to do, or maybe if I wanted to, I wasn't getting off of work and continuing to learn technology or to enjoy technology. And when I switched jobs, I started to finally get back into it. I started to acquire that love again, and I want to find time. Like I'm going home and I'm like, I could be on the computer right now coding, but on top of being married, I also have kids, and they're quite young. So I can't even be on the computer, in the kitchen without a baby running up to me and grabbing my leg because I'm not allowed to do anything,
right.
on my own. The kids got to be right there. Yeah. So I understand the struggle there. Work-life balance. I mean, I'm not sure if there is any of that left today, but definitely when there's other people who want to be a part of your time, it can get difficult to really have that, not bachelor life, but to have that self-centered kind of life that you did when you were younger, when you were on your own in your own apartment doing your own thing.
Right, just me time.
So this is episode 2. I know we've had a couple of, there were things about the first episode that we liked, things that we didn't. We had some issues with some sound quality. One of the things that I noticed, at least for me, was that the bass was a little too high, and I thought there was a little bit of popping. So I went out and I got a pop filter to come over the mic, and hopefully that'll soften some of those words. And then you got some new equipment too, right?
Yeah, I used to have a whole setup for podcasting. And then I just in the move and kind of things getting shifted. I bought a new house. I lost it. So I actually bought the mic that you have now, which is actually working out great for me. Ooh. The bass in your voice was my fault. That was bad editing because since I was using the crappy built-in microphone array in my laptop, I was buried in the background. And in order to bring me up and cut out some of the noise that happens when you raise the fidelity that way, or not the fidelity, but the gain, you're going to bring up a lot of the noise with that. And so I basically the bass came from me trying to muffle out all the noise and equal out all our levels. And then, I went and actually, I guess nobody would know because they either heard the not great edited version or the slightly better edited version. They wouldn't know that there was a difference, but I actually went and re-uploaded it because I figured out the recording software we're using actually splits when you talk and when I talk into 2 different channels into a single audio file that I can then split in Audition, which is awesome. I didn't really catch that until later. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Those 2 channels, that's me and that's Mike. So, Michael. Did I miss that on the intro? I think I called you Mike. Well, we'll get there.
So I should send you the bill for this pop filter then, is what you're saying.
No, the mic sounds great. I've done a ton of tests with it, and it's just nice to have something that sounds better. So it's a great tip, Mike. Thanks for that.
So it's funny, the other thing that we talked about on the first podcast was C-Sharp's use of the var keyword and the way typing is handled. And there's that XKCD comic strip of the guy sitting at his computer and his wife says, are you coming to bed or whatever? And he's like, I can't. Somebody is wrong on the internet. Right. And I felt that way the other day at work. There was a conversation. Somebody had posted a Medium article to, I guess, a JavaScript LinkedIn group, and I just happened to be on LinkedIn at the time, and I saw it, and I decided to participate, which was a huge mistake on my part. But it was somebody who had posted a Medium article and was actually complaining about things like TypeScript, things that were bringing type safety to JavaScript. And I couldn't even finish reading the whole article because I thought it was absolutely ridiculous. as far as what the guy was complaining about. But as I'm reading the comments, because my comment was ridiculous. I said ridiculous, and I decided
you said actually ridiculous. Unquote.
I actually said ridiculous, and then I followed it up with a little bit of a reason why. Enterprise programming. If you're doing a ton of coding for large enterprise application, type safety will save you, a lot of time. It'll identify errors because we do know how poorly JavaScript is at capturing a lot of errors that deal with just comparisons, and type conversions and things like that. You can run into an awful lot of issues. Things can be null, undefined, and false, or not, depending on which equality you use. So there's a ton of issues, and there was a guy who followed up on the comments, and he wasn't directing it at me. He was directing it at another guy. They kind of avoided replying to me, but he made the comment that with linting, you don't need type safety, and I've never had issues. And then he made this weird comment about, I've dealt with mean stack applications that, have 5,000 lines of code, and I've never had a problem. Clearly he doesn't know. Linting is just code recommendations. It's JS Lint, which was by Douglas Crockford, or JS Hint, which is a slightly more lenient version. It's just there to make sure that you code in a specific way because of the issues that JavaScript does have. But it's not the same as type safety. It's not the same as what TypeScript offers you. And the comment about, mean stack, so you have MongoDB, which is probably just for data in, data out, because it's a document database. You have Express.js, which is a framework within Node in order to do web applications. And then the A stands for Angular, which is the front-end version. And, of course, the N stands for Node. So this guy is talking about a Node application. He's using a framework on the back end, and he's using a framework on the front end, and he makes the comment about 5,000 lines of code, which just cracks me up, because as I'm reading it, I look at the one file that's open on my computer, and it's a JavaScript file with almost 1,000 lines of code in it. And I have about 20 to 30 more files in that application that eventually get merged when we push it into production. So I'm like, we are well above 5,000 lines of code is not a lot. And first of all, counting lines of code to determine whether or not that code is actually good it's false equivalence.
It's absurd.
Just because you have 5,000 lines of code doesn't mean you wrote good code. And I just had to laugh because it's like, well, first of all, Microsoft developed TypeScript, and they developed it because the entire Azure portal, which they put in TypeScript, it was getting very large, and they were having issues with the way JavaScript handles, type safety. They were getting errors. So they developed it, and then, of course, eventually Google adopted it for Angular 2. So he's talking about essentially using a version of a front-end framework that has since moved on to something with type safety. So, it's one of those wars among programmers as far as what's great and what's not great. But I just thought that the offhanded dismissiveness of type safety, because in your own little world you've never had an issue with it, was just the guy was kind of showing his ignorance.
Yeah, and I think it's funny too, because you're talking about type safety and kind of having TypeScript, which counting lines is a sort of saying, well, it's good because it's this many lines, or it's bad because it's this many lines. And one of the reasons I think that JavaScript is so popular is because it's very mutable. It's very loose, obviously, right, compared to a strictly typed language, which lets people get away with doing a lot of things in probably not the best way. So to me, if you have 5,000 lines, and I'm sort of like almost being a hypocrite here, because I sort of feel like the more lines of code you have in a JavaScript file, the greater likelihood that there's a ton of kludges and bad code in there. Because It's just like anything else, the more moving parts you have, there's probably a lot of function calls. You know what I mean? It's a lot of variable declarations, and it's just really easy for that thing to fall into a quagmire, as the Azure team found out. And I just think it's kind of funny that you're talking about, I can do 5,000 lines, whatever. And it's like, no, it's actually probably a bad thing.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. And I've started to look into more about type theory to begin with, and there's actually type-driven development is starting to become a thing. And I started looking into that. And the more I look into it, the more, I mean, it seems like it was the thing that was missing from something that caused, test-driven development. People did test-driven development,
right.
Because they were having issues with errors. So I think type theory, I think type safety is an important thing to consider when you're building enterprise applications. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting that we recorded that episode, and not long afterwards, you have somebody arguing about, TypeScript, and I had to throw my 2 cents in there. And I'm not on there arguing with every single person because I just don't have the time for it, but it was just funny to throw my 2 cents in and see my comments be summarily ignored.
Right.
But anyway, so this episode we were going to talk about technologically augmented humans, right?
That's right.
So what made you want to – I think this was your topic. You wanted to pick this. So what made you want to pick this topic?
Well, I mean, we're at an era now that this isn't science fiction, and there's different representations of it on different levels, right? So the first thing is we have maybe technologically augmented is maybe too specific. I don't want to get caught too much in the semantics of it, but one of the early things I thought was interesting was I forget what the term they call it now, but they would stick pieces of, and this goes back to just traditional body modification, right? We're going past scarification, past just tattoos, which are almost passé now, into like they would insert gears or insert just pieces of metal into their body, and then there, of course, there were the body modification people who were into amputeeism, right? So it's not really technological there, but it seems to me now the evolution of that now we're combining technology with that kind of stuff, almost as a culture, as a trend. And the first thing I saw that made me think, this is interesting, was not just the cool stuff that they give to people who lost their legs in the war, or something that let them run, like it was cool to bent pieces of bent plastic,
right?
But also people who were wearing more stylish, just like prosthesis, right? They would have I saw some gorgeously, one was carved like a piece of lace, like the whole thing all throughout was carved like a beautiful piece of lace. And then I started to think, well, that's really cool, and that's here now, and there's also a lot of stuff too where people are able to, now we have, and you can see it, people have robot arms, and they're able to pick things up and have actually digits to manipulate things in front of them. They can paint with these cybernetic arms. It's amazing, and it hasn't happened yet, right? And obviously games like Deus Ex kind of get into the psychology of what happens when you have people who perhaps gain an advantage because of their augmentation. Something, maybe extra strength, or maybe they have some sort of augmentation that, I don't know, lets them process information in a different way, more powerfully, whatever. I mean, that's more the sci-fi side of things. But what is interesting to me is how culture always breaks things down. And what I mean by that is, it's never like, oh, this is cool. We can we as a human race now have access to cybernetic technology that we can augment our bodies. It'll be, oh, you have that crappy augmentation, or you've got the Apple cyber arm. I like the Android cyber arm. You know what I mean? As an example, it's kind of make it relevant to today. People, even with their phones and stuff. I mean, it's, oh, well, that's the lowbrow phone, and how people place themselves at a higher level, hierarchically, culturally, and it's ridiculous, right? And my mind started to get to think about, imagine all the different ways that people would find a reason to bicker over something so cool as, technological augmentation. You'd have probably, in my mind, I'd imagine the cosmetic versus the utilitarian. My arm actually does something, your arm's just pretty, right? And then even within those groups, with the cosmetic people, I think it would be more likely that sort of style versus whatever thing, oh, yours is ugly. You got it at that cheap little 3D fabrication store that does cyber arms for $30. Mine's a special one that lights up. You know what I think?
They do have. I mean, there have been programs, there have been videos that I've seen online of 3D printers that have printed arms, prosthetic arms for people. There's one about a little girl who had a 3D printed arm. And that's fantastic. I mean, it says, wow, look, this is great. We have 3D printers that do this. But you're right. I mean, materials will make a difference, right? I mean, your vehicle materials make a difference. Your house materials make a difference. So there will come a point where, oh, you need a prosthetic. Here's this plastic pick one from the 1990s or from the early 2000s, you can use that for your arm now. Meanwhile, the guy down the street who has a $100,000 a year job or $200,000 a year job, he can afford a better one. Meanwhile, the wealthy people of the world have the cybernetics that actually attach to their muscles, attach to their nervous system. They're able to feel sensations through it, and it creates that part of it is us culturally, but there's that inherent unfairness with advancing technology, and it's the same. It's the same in everything, right? Pharmaceutical industry, based on the cost of drugs, there are people who can afford certain treatments and people who can't afford certain treatments. Rather than saying, let's heal everybody, let's eliminate all pain and suffering, let's eliminate all disease, let's eliminate all hunger, we don't. We say, wait, this is a capitalistic society. Somebody's got to make money off of this, and therefore you're not going to get food, or you're going to get the government cheese, and then you can have the $20 salad or the $20 sandwich from the high price place.
Right.
And you'll see the same thing with augmentation, unfortunately.
Yeah, right. People are going to pay more for the gilded augmentations. Meanwhile, people will get the cheap plastic 3D printed arm. And lost in all of that noise will be the idea that, look at this, it's no longer a world we live in where if you lose an appendage, you are not disadvantaged. You have options available to you.
The advances in prosthetics have impressed me a great deal over the last several years. They just had a news story a couple of days ago about a tattoo artist who had lost his limb, and they replaced it with a mechanical tattoo gun. So his arm is.
I saw that.
Now, how fantastic. Here's a guy who relies on his arms and his hands and the precision of his ability to control those hands in order to make a living. He loses an arm, and they replace it. That's okay. Here, we'll slap on an actual tattoo, gun to your arm, and let's see how that works out for you. Yeah, and
I saw the picture of that, and it went all the way up to his elbow, and I was wondering how much of that was, cosmetic to the point where it actually became like a practical machine, right? Because it looked like his whole arm, it looked like something out of a movie. It was cool looking.
He literally had a bionic arm.
Yeah.
And the advances, I remember watching, I forget which program it was. I watched a program, because I watch a lot of science programs, whether it's through the Wormhole or Curiosity Stream. I have a subscription to that, and there's all kinds of stuff on robotics. And I remember when initially they were talking about a prosthetic limb that, if you can control a limb, and you can make it move. At this point in time, at least at that time, there was no sensation. You're not necessarily getting feedback. So when you pick up a bottle and you hold it, you know how much pressure to give it. You wouldn't do that if you couldn't actually sense touching. So if you had a bionic arm and you held a can, you crushed a can by squeezing it. And what this program was showing was that they basically built into this prosthetic arm that when it grabs it, it'll actually feel the arm, the mechanics itself sense that pressure, even though the person doesn't, and it'll actually release tension. So it'll give you enough to hold that can without crushing it, which is a huge step in being able to go about your day-to-day life without ruining things.
Right. No. Yeah.
And then here we are. Excuse me. Not that long ago, there was another news story that talked about how they were actually giving feedback back into the brain, and they were able to. I think they were able to run a cotton ball along the outside of the prosthetic hand. And the person was able to, I believe, not just sense that there was something there, but also identify the feeling. That's crazy stuff.
I hadn't heard of that. That really is. It's exciting and sort of unbelievable that we're there already. And I know they're doing things like they're working on screens inside of contact lenses, which is kind of neat. I'll probably be first. Well, I won't be first in line. I'm not quite the early adopter I used to be, but having some way to enhance or overlay information in front of my vision, and obviously Google Glass was sort of a failed experiment in that society wasn't ready for it yet, which is interesting because, again, going back to Deus Ex, there was that social rejection of overtly modified people. And it's surprising to me because I would have thought, had Google Glass and the controversy that came up around it not existed, and if I were to be asked, do I think it's possible that there's some sort of prejudice that could arise against augmented people? And I'd say not really. Not unless there was some sort of tangible benefit that people were gaining. Like, say, somehow augmentations, and this is just total made-up nonsense, augmentations prevented you from ever catching the cold. Because something, just the way they affected the nervous system or something crazy, right? Then people would be like, well, then I guess I'll get an augmentation because I never want to catch a cold, but there would never be a reason to be prejudicial. However, here we have people with cameras and information overlaid on their face, and despite the fact that everyone's walking around with a computer with a camera anyway, and everyone's got theirs out, suddenly put it on someone's face, people flip their lids.
Well, there's a subtlety to that. Well, the big pushback on the Google Glass was that you could theoretically record somebody without them knowing it. Even though I think it gave an indicator, right? It gave an indicator that something was being
Google
recorded.
Was pretty.
But many people probably wouldn't know that. But I would have always assumed that some sort of augmentation would cause prejudice, simply because we offer discrimination. I mean, we portray discrimination against disabled people to begin with. Against all people that are different from us, and people see a person in a wheelchair and they might have comments about that. People see a person with a missing arm and they gawk at that. And replacing that with a prosthetic, you just say, oh, look, that guy's got a missing arm, he's got a fake one. So I mean, and some of it's ignorance, some of it, I mean, if we don't know the person, and personally, you develop that stereotyping on top of the person. But I mean, from a human, psychological standpoint, we tend to single out those who are different and treat them differently. And then when you start to get into the situation where that person who is different has received some sort of augmentation that not just replaces their lost ability, but could potentially give them a greater benefit in certain areas, whether it's making them stronger or they can see other things, there's going to be pushback. I mean, I would definitely see that. I mean,
yeah, and that's the thing, right? So seeing the prejudice against handicapped people, for whatever ridiculous reason, people are like that. Oh, this person in the wheelchair is in my way, they're slowing me down. The detriment. People recognize the detriment, and they don't want to be held up by somebody else's detriment. And I see that will probably be where the prejudice comes in. I don't agree with it, but that is where I would see it coming into play, right? With cybernetic or just technological enhancements, it isn't a detriment. It is, it's an augmentation. It's an enhancement. And I just thought that since it's something that's available to pretty much everybody, there wouldn't be that, that quick snap judgment, but there clearly is. Maybe, and again, it comes back to some people maybe can't afford those enhancements. Maybe some people don't want them because of the idea of an external thing being integrated into your body in some way.
Piercings are available to everybody. Tattoos are available to everybody. Not everybody gets them.
Right.
And there's still prejudice against people, that have them. I mean, my wife Heather has, a quarter sleeve on her arm, and she's got tattoos in a lot of different places. And people have, I live in a rural area of Virginia now, and people have looked at her, oddly. Even though there's a lot of people, in this area with tattoos, she has garnered looks. I've had people who aren't prejudiced say, "Oh, your wife has tattoos," and I'm like, I don't even think about it. But that type of prejudice is still out there, just for you doing something that's considered out of the norm. So if somebody decides that they are going to augment their system, they're going to swap out their eyes. I mean, look at that television show Orphan Black, which at least in the first season, and then I think in the newer season, one of the things that there was a group called Neolution, I think, and they were augmenting their bodies biologically. Not cybernetically, but they were augmenting their bodies because they wanted to, because they were able to. And there's obviously going to be prejudice against that. If somebody decides, hey, I want a vestigial tail, right, and they augment their body so that they have one, other people are going to look at them at the beach and think that they're lunatics.
Right. And you're right. And there's and I don't know if you read the Lucifer Principle.
Parts of it.
Yeah, there's a really in the beginning it kind of gets into how culture itself, if you could imagine culture as its own thing, the way that culture thrives is by bringing together that which is same and alienating, and sometimes aggressively, that which is different, right? So it's almost intrinsic to not just human nature, but just all things that create culture, mammals, anything. I mean, I haven't done a ton of research in it, but I would imagine that culture isn't limited to and culture as a means of survival, of saying we're all the same, so we have to attack the thing that's different. I don't think that that's limited to just mammals, right?
No, I mean the behavior you talk about. I mean, it's typical in-group, out-group behavior, right? And especially when you again, if we bring this full circle back to the idea that there are those who will be elite, who will have better things, and those who are poor, who won't have any, you're going to band together with the group of people that are most similar to you in order to blame the others. So if you have a group of people in a poor area that are fearful of something or another, and there are people who are augmented, just a handful of them, it doesn't matter. They're going to be the group to blame, regardless of whether they're doing the bad thing or not.
Right, and that's actually another salient point, talking about the game Deus Ex, where we keep kind of coming back to that, because I think that Human Revolution, that game, it did a really cool thing, and I think it's very difficult with science fiction, cyberpunk especially, games, to kind of take it into a very interesting examination of what would things be like if we had all of this advanced tech, and we will eventually have it. So it's really just sort of like wondering what our inevitable future will be like, because as opposed to following just tropes of guy can just stick a machine gun in his arm and go on a rampage. It went not only into the sort of fears that would arise from the other, right? In this case being people who have in some way integrated with technology. So it's the fear of the other, and then to capitalize on what you were just talking about, which is banding together and fighting back against that fear, or sort of blaming, is the technology, of course, is something man-made. We build it, so that also means it's prone to being hacked. When we start getting these technological augmentations that are inevitably part of the, what those in the IT field called IoT, the Internet of Things, where everything that can be connected to the Internet will be connected to the Internet. And of course, when we start getting not just these, not like a tattoo machine arm, but like an actual arm that has software to do things. Well, naturally, right? It almost seems like a no-brainer that we're going to have that thing connected to the Internet to do over-the-air updates and stuff like that. I mean, that's inevitable, right?
Right. I mean, and it doesn't even have to be connected to the Internet. There was Through the Wormhole is a show that's on Science Channel, hosted by Morgan Freeman, and I distinctly remember an episode in which they talked about embedded chips in human beings. And I think it was just an RFID chip, and the guy literally showed how, through a simulation, how if you have a chip in your hand, and that chip, you could walk by a terminal, and that terminal can infect the chip. And then now you go from that terminal to another terminal, and it goes from your chip to that terminal. And what it was basically showing was that in a highly secured area where that RFID chip is being used for you to enter into the building, it showed how a single person, who can get infected with, that particular virus can then spread that virus not just to all of the other buildings in this, secure corporation or system or whatever facility it was, but also to all of the people with their RFID or the chips in their system.
That's crazy.
And it was only a simulation, but it distinctly showed how quickly, much like any other type of virus or pandemic or epidemic or whatever, in the real world, it showed how quickly this particular virus could spread based on just the fact that somebody had something implanted into their system.
Right.
So the moment we have our smart homes that are connected, and we suddenly decide that we're going to have a chip in our hand and we're going to unlock our house and unlock our doors, how soon before, even if you're not talking about an integral part of your body, a chip in your brain or your arm or your bionic heart, because we certainly have fake hearts today, and we will certainly have biomechanical hearts in the relatively near future. We're not even talking about those things. We're talking about something as simple as an identifier chip used to enter in and out of a building. I got a chip in my badge in my for work.
Right.
You're just taking that simple piece of technology, and now it's in your hand instead, so that you can't lose it. But suddenly, your television, which is connected to your the internet, is infected. Your Xbox or your PlayStation is infected. Your Nest on your wall is infected. All of your lights are smart lights because you've connected them to your Nest.
Right.
Your fire extinguishers because it's part of the Nest system. How many different things? You have Amazon dashes on your your detergent and your cereal, and some punk 12-year-old kid who hacks into the chip in your hand, and you pass by the dash, and it sends a signal to Amazon to order 5,000 boxes of cereal to your house. Simple pranks like that will be possible, and those are just the innocent things.
Yeah.
Not to mention anything that's necessarily malicious.
Yeah, right. I mean, we've taken the metaphor we call computer viruses, right? But we've taken that metaphor to its logical conclusion, and now they can become actual communicable diseases, technological communicable diseases.
That is pretty wild to think about. That
it is, and the real thing that and I don't like to use words, and I actually said creepy early on, and I actually try to be very mindful of when we're talking about new cutting-edge technology. I listen to a lot of tech podcasts, and one of the things that irks me is when people use words like creepy, eerie, anything to sort of have this kind of like, in lieu of understanding what's happening, we just dismiss it as something that's creepy, right? Technology, ooh, creepy. It's not creepy. These things, when used correctly, hopefully when people aren't functioning with malicious intent, these things enhance our lives in ways, eliminating menial tasks, that really bogged us down before, in a separate life, a different world when we didn't have this kind of technology. Maybe people didn't get as much done in a day, and there's debates to be had about how much work should a human being be expected to do in a day. But if you can get a lot done minimally, I think the sky's the limit. I don't think getting things done is a bad thing, because that could be for work.
A very basic anecdote, and this is fresh in my mind because it happened today, and I mentioned the Amazon Dash thing, so it's related to that. So on an impulse buy, I ordered something off of Amazon on Friday, and I took their no-rush delivery, and even despite the no-rush delivery, it showed up in 2 days, and the second day just happened to be today, which is a Sunday. And I'm outside. My wife and I were doing gardening, and the mail lady shows up, and she drops it off, and she was talking to us for a little bit, and I was like, yeah, says I actually, it's cool that you guys deliver on Sunday, but I started to think you guys would hate me because for some reason everything I ordered was on a Friday, so it was showing up on a Sunday. And she was laughing, and she was like, she says, I didn't know why the U.S. Postal Service and Amazon kind of struck that deal to do the deliveries on Sunday. She says, but I kind of came to this weird realization. She was doing a rural route. She's normally a city route person, and so she was out in this town called New Market, which is probably about half an hour from me. The New Market's nowhere near. It has a grocery store out there, but it's nowhere near like a Walmart or any type of place where you could get, a Costco or a Target or anything like that. And she said she made this delivery that was, an Amazon delivery to this woman who lived out in, some dirt road out in New Market. It was a box of Depends. It was like a large, quantity of Depends to a woman who was 75 years old. And the person who was living with her was just recently, I don't know whether it was a car accident or something, but she was disabled. And so neither one of them were very mobile, nor could they get out and do things. And she said, I see the value in something like Amazon Dash, and the whole reason, if you're that woman and you're waiting, you're 75 years old and you're waiting for your box of Depends because you can no longer use the bathroom on your own, control your own bowel movements. You can't afford to wait an extra day for those things to come, and she can't just get up and leave and go somewhere. I don't think either one of them had a driver's license. You either have to rely on the kindness of your neighbors to drive 45 minutes to the closest Target or Walmart, or hope that the local grocery store has something for you, or hope that somebody brings something back to you. But instead, she has the internet, and she's able to dial into Amazon and make an order and have it delivered to her. Which is, I never thought of it that way. But here's something that simple, something that easy.
It's a great thing, and this is sort of going back, kind of talking about how just getting things done and how we're trying to, I think, redefine what we consider old paradigms. And I always feel funny saying words like that, right? Because it sounds like I'm at some sort of like boardroom meeting. But I can't think of another way to phrase it. But like we still have a lot of traditional ways of thinking. Like, I don't, like you said, I feel bad having somebody deliver something on Sunday. And I was cognizant of that too when I actually ordered this new microphone. It was on a Sunday, and it was same day delivery through Amazon, same thing. And I was like, well, let me just order it, and it was available, the same day delivery. So I took it. I'm like, let me try this. And that was my first. I was like, I feel bad. This guy's got to work on Sunday. Well, first, this guy's working, so he probably doesn't care. He's like, hey, whatever. But then I thought, I'm challenging my own perceptions of what it means to like work on your own terms, which is great. But I wanted to bring it back around to the blaming. Technology and how culture can sometimes you group up and you blame that other group for things for whatever reason. And of course, those are kind of primitive examples of things. And I say primitive, I just mean like ultra basic, examples. But in a modern society where there's benefits to manipulation, especially in a kind of weird corporate. Like a corporate-controlled media sort of world we live in now, where like being a journalist today means nothing. Sadly, in many ways we do live in a cyberpunk dystopia. Media is nothing. It is entertainment or propaganda arm of any given number of lobbyists for corporations, right? So when you have things like cybernetic arms or anything that's integrated into the body that then can be touched by some external source, code, a hacker, whatever it is, an advertisement, a pop-up ad in your contact lens,
which will come,
I'm sure, right? And that, but the thing that's interesting to me is, and this is something where when I was talking about, I don't like to use words like creepy or eerie. What does creep me out though? And I mean this truly as somebody who wholly embraces new technology, is the fact that when we do have these connected devices as a part of our body, not just like a phone or something you can kind of put like a an arm that you can kind of take on and take off and put on, but something that's integrated into your body now, like a heart or something that's connected for whatever reason, or maybe not connected to the internet, just accessible by external devices. The idea, and this, again, Deus Ex gets into this, is what happens when there's already enough consternation about these kinds of technologies, and there will be for a long time, and then people use that public fear to kind of create, they're using it as a flashpoint for some whatever possible political or social motivation you can imagine. Somebody's got it. What happens when people start hacking these devices to do bad things? And I don't say bad like, control somebody's arm to shoot somebody, but what if that was possible? What if some, anti-gun guy was like, the only way we can possibly move forward with banning all guns, and, and I know that's a very touchy subject. It's the most obvious one I could think of. Like, so you make a guy shoot somebody in cold blood, but they had no control over their arm. Because it's been hacked. That's almost a ridiculous scenario, but that's only because we live in a time where that's possibly ridiculous.
And then you run into a situation where people start talking about putting restrictions on your augmentations. So now you're looking at increasing regulation, and then you're going to have a larger black market. But if somebody's arm is treated just like we treat weaponry, do you take that person's arm away? And what gives you the right to do that after we've provided this grand technology? What if just the fact that somebody has a mechanical arm, they're stronger than another person? Or what if somebody with a mechanical arm goes to a bar and some drunk comes up to him and grabs him and harasses him because he has a prosthetic arm? He punches that person, breaks their jaw. What happens then outside of that person gets sued? Maybe the company who developed the arm gets sued. Maybe it sets technology back, 10 years because of lawsuits, or maybe that person gets their arm taken away and can get thrown in prison. I mean, there's a whole ethical, dilemma when it comes to something like this, and it's all based on fear, for one, and it's based on greed, for another. And a lack of understanding. There's a distinct lack of an ignorance, a lack of knowledge when it comes to things like this. And again, it's a very much a situation to where we are advancing technologically beyond our ethics, or at least faster than our ethics. And what was that William Gibson quote?
Oh, that the future's here. It's just not evenly distributed.
Right. I mean,
which is definitely true. It is here, and not a lot of people have access to it. The people who don't have access are probably going to be bitter because they either A, want it for the enhancements that it provides but can't afford it, or hate it just because it's creepy, and maybe they think that, God didn't intend for us to stick pieces of metal in our arm, or whatever their reasoning is. There are definitely people who, I know people now who they just hate mobile phones. They hate whatever
right.
People still call them smartphones. I don't think I've ever called my phone a smartphone. They just don't like that people are always looking at their screen. And I'm like, well, they're, reading stuff. They're interacting with other people. They might not be talking to you, but they're talking to somebody. Why do they need to talk to you in, physical space? Why do you care what they're doing? I was having a conversation with a guy. So I was up in my in-laws, they have a mountain house. So we go up there, and it is on the top of a mountain, so there is no internet. There is no cellular service. There's nothing. You are completely shut off. And you mention that to people, and almost guaranteed you're going to get a binary reaction. There's almost it's interesting. It's either going to be, oh, man, that sounds great, or, man, no way. I'm in the no way camp. But really, I kind of don't care, because I go up there. I know there's not going to be any internet, so I bring things to enter. We're going up there for a reason, normally to hang out and spend time with each other. So we don't need that distraction anyway. And if we do need to work, you can just drive down to the bottom of the mountain, and there's little cafes and stuff. So it's not a big deal, but it's just funny to me. So I was talking to somebody up there, and I was just saying, oh yeah, there's no internet connection, and he's like, oh yeah, I don't, that's great. I don't know why people need all these phones anyway. And I forget how he worded it now, but the point was, I remember thinking to myself, he wasn't really, it was something, he was talking about himself, who needs it? I'm like, well, a lot of people need it. He was basically just sort of projecting his own, he doesn't care, he doesn't have, he had an old flip phone, he didn't understand it, right? So it's clearly not a thing for him, but instead of just saying, it doesn't bother me because I don't need it, he projected on other people and went on this rant about why do people's faces always need to be in phones and who needs all that crap. I'm like,
it's distinctly not a phone. And I know you and I have had this conversation, and I've had this conversation with other people, but what we were essentially talking about is a small computer with the entire world's knowledge that we know on it, with a bunch of different apps to do a bunch of different things, and hey, it happens to be able to call people. I almost never use my cell phone to call. Yeah. Very rarely. The only person who calls me is my wife, maybe my mom. So she can see how the grandkids are going. There are a lot of people Skype me, people sending messages on Twitter, Facebook Messenger, regular Facebook. There are a lot of ways to get a hold of me that don't require somebody picking up the phone and calling me. And honestly, I like it that way. I mean, if you really need to call me about something, great, call me. But I rarely use it for that. Yet I have one.
Yeah.
I have a phone, and I wouldn't go back to a flip phone because I use it more than almost any other device that I have. Now, I've turned off a lot of notifications and stuff like that, but it is an important piece of technology that has advanced humanity greatly. There are people who have never had landlines. There are people who've never had the internet and computers, but they end up with a cell phone that allows them to get onto the internet. And that's just an amazing thing, and it's an amazing spread of knowledge. So you're right, that kind of vitriol against devices just because people are using them constantly, it seems like a get off my lawn type of argument.
It really is, it's and because they don't want it or see value in it, they kind of want to take it away from everybody else. And in a way, I almost feel like some of these people are obviously older, but they're not octogenarians. They're just sort of in their 50s, and they're just kind of you always see them, reminisce about the 70s and you didn't have all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, well, there were people in the 70s working towards building the stuff today. They had a vision, and they're building towards that vision. So I don't think that everybody in this, all of a sudden we just entered into an age and these phones just plopped into our laps, and all of a sudden it altered the course of human history in a way that nobody foresaw. Some people foresaw it, and they built it that way.
Right.
It's not a bad thing. And it always just kind of irritated me. And, back to the phone thing, it is about agency. It's not only about agency when you're using your phone in a public place that gets other people aggravated. It's about agency when you're using your phone and say, one of the reasons I don't like phone calls is it takes away my ability to say, this is when I want to use the technology on my terms. Calling me is sort of like, you want me to either talk to you now? It's very demanding. I'm not a fan of it. So
right.
I don't want to get on that's sort of irrelevant to anything, but it's just one of those things that I recognize. And it would one of the ways that technology empowers us is we now have more control over when we want to do things and when we want to get things done. You know, I struggle to understand in some ways why some people see that so negative.
Right. No, I agree with you. Any last words on the subject?
No, I'm good for now.
So I just want to point out, I mean, obviously we're talking about, modifications to people and technological modifications that help people more than anything. I mean, we've talked a lot about fear. We've talked a lot about, about hatred and about prejudice. But we are making advancements in technology in which people who have lost limbs are gaining the ability to have limbs again. And it's not just limbs. It's also sight. People who have lost sight have been receiving, bionic eye implants that have allowed them to see some things, to see shapes, to see whatever. And there have been people who have had ear implants, which have allowed them to hear. So, I mean, this is a biomedical thing, and this is something that helps people live greater lives, live whole lives. And you and I both understand, and we look at it from a cyberpunk perspective, that we will get to a point in the future where people will have, that tattoo artist could have a regular bionic arm, but he has a tattoo gun for an arm. That's part of his life. People are going to make customizations to the things that they have, and it's just going to happen. And hopefully it's a little more utopian than dystopian, and hopefully no matter what happens, it doesn't prevent the advancement of medical technology in order to help people. So that's it for this episode. You can subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, and I believe Google Play also.
Yep.
The show is produced by Bill. You still using Neologic Media as your production board?
Yeah, I'm using Neologic Media at hotmail.com because that's where a lot of we're putting all the stuff on archive.org, just a straight up file. So that's sort of my, yes. Sorry, we got rambly.
So the intro and outro song is, Perturbator's Theme by Perturbator. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, Perturbator. Yeah, it's a really kind of a weird, it doesn't roll right.
Did he ever get back to us on whether or not we could actually use it, or are we just going fair?
Yeah, no, I reached out to Perturbator, and if he objects to our use of his song as an intro and outro, and that's fine. We'll take it down, but otherwise we're just gonna keep using it.
Give him a ring.
Yeah, I reached out to him. I did the best I could.
We tried. All right, so we will see you guys next time.
Later.